With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement on Israel and Gaza. Over 7 months since the horrors of October the 7th, there is no end to the current conflict in sight. This government wants to bring the conflict to a sustainable end as soon as possible. But as so often with conflicts of this nature, the question is not about our desire for peace, but rather about the best means of achieving it. We continue to believe that the fastest way to end the conflict is to secure a deal which gets the hostages out and allows for a pause in the fighting in Gaza. We would then have to work with our international partners to turn that pause into a sustainable permanent ceasefire. Building momentum towards a lasting peace will require a number of elements, including removing Hamas's capacity to launch attacks against Israel. It was a deal of this kind which secured a pause in the fighting before Christmas, the only such pause since Hamas's horrific attack. And it was this approach which the United Nations Security Council endorsed just last month, following some effective British diplomacy. A deal with Hamas for a pause in the fighting would involve exchanging hundreds of Palestinian prisoners charged with serious acts of terrorism in return for the hostages' release. I do not underestimate, Mr. Speaker, how difficult this must be for the Israeli government, but it is the best way forward we see right now. We continue to work closely with the United States and partners in the region to support such a deal, and we do not believe that the ICC prosecutor seeking warrants will help in this regard. As we have said from the outset, we do not think the ICC has jurisdiction in this case. Mr. Speaker, a deal as I have described offers the best prospects of reuniting more hostages with their families. The anguish for them is unbearable. I am sure the whole House joins me in holding the family of Nadav Popplewell in our thoughts at this deeply distressing time. We are still working intensively to establish the facts after the awful video his Hamas kidnappers released last week. And the Foreign Secretary met the family last week to hear more about their ordeal firsthand. Likewise, we send our condolences to those families whose loved ones the Israeli authorities stated last week had died. At the same time, the toll on civilians in Gaza continues to rise. Images from the Strip give us some sense of what they endure. Civilians piling belongings onto a cart led by a donkey, or seeking to scrape together a meal in a makeshift shelter. We have seen appalling attacks on aid convoys and UN offices by Israeli extremists, and the tragic deaths of UN and other humanitarian personnel in Gaza. We keep in close contact with Sigrid Kaag, the UN humanitarian coordinator, and we condemn all attacks on aid workers and support the United Nations call for an independent investigation. The government of Israel has previously set out publicly their commitment to increase the flow of aid into Gaza significantly. But we need to see far more. The Prime Minister impressed the urgency of this on the 30th of April. In the past 10 days, the Foreign Secretary has spoken to Israeli ministers Ron Dermer and Israel Katz. He has called on them to implement in full Israel's aid commitments. We want to see humanitarian aid allowed to enter through all relevant crossing points, including in Rafah. Critically needed goods flowing in, particularly fuel and medical supplies. Effective deconfliction processes to ensure that aid can be distributed safely and effectively. Critical infrastructure restored and protected. Evacuations for all those eligible. Concrete action to protect civilians and minimise casualties. And as Israeli Minister Benny Gantz said over the weekend, more planning for reconstruction and a return to Palestinian civilian governance of Gaza once the fighting has ceased. We remain, Mr. Speaker, absolutely committed to getting aid into Gaza to alleviate the suffering, and we are working with a wide variety of other governments and aid agencies to deliver aid by land, sea and air. I am delighted to confirm to the House that we have now successfully delivered British aid onto Gaza's shore, using the Cyprus Maritime Corridor, which we and our partners, notably the United States, the UAE and Cyprus, made operational just last week. We have committed almost £10 million in funding. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary Cardigan Bay is acting as a logistics hub for the operation, and we have now delivered over 8,000 shelter coverage kits alongside aid from the US and UAE. With more aid to follow in the coming weeks, including hygiene kits and forklift trucks, and work to develop other effective partnerships for the delivery of aid continues. Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon is in Qatar today discussing a health partnership for Palestinians so that British Medical Training Agency can support doctors and health practitioners treating Palestinian patients. And we know that much more aid is required, but that delivery by land remains the quickest and most effective option. So we continue to work closely with Oman to maximise the aid delivered via the Jordan land corridor. I pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to all those, including aid workers and military personnel, diplomats and medical professionals, who are involved in Britain's efforts to save lives and alleviate the suffering of civilians in Gaza. And I can confirm to the House that last week, intense efforts by the Foreign Office led to the departure from Gaza of 3 British aid workers who were at risk from an outbreak of fighting. Mr. Speaker, as the fighting continues, we now estimate around 800,000 Palestinian civilians have fled from where they were seeking shelter in Rafah to other parts of the southern strip. The extent of this displacement is why we have been clear that we would not support a major Israeli military operation in Rafah unless there was a very clear plan for how to protect people and save lives. Mr. Speaker, we have not seen that plan. And we and 13 of our partners, including France, Germany, Italy and Australia, set out in a detailed letter our concerns to the Israeli government. Mr. Speaker, after over 7 months of fighting, it is becoming difficult to imagine the realisation of a lasting peace. But Britain continues to try to build momentum towards that goal. This will require not only the release of all the hostages and an end to the current fighting, but also the removal of Hamas's capacity to launch attacks against Israel, Hamas no longer being in charge in Gaza, the formation of a new Palestinian government for the West Bank and Gaza, and a political horizon for the Palestinians, providing a credible and irreversible pathway towards a two-state solution. This is what we continue to strive towards: peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. I commend this statement to the House.
Secretary of State David